Awesome. Are you recording? I thought we were recording already.
I thought we were already recording.
So that was somebody else's note popped in and said that it was recording. So there's two recordings happening. Somebody's note taker is also recording.
Got it.
So now we're recording as well, so we can capture and post it to YouTube later.
All right. So we're official now, Amy?
We're official.
Okay. Can we ask you about your CrossFit workout this morning first then?
Oh, you put me on the spot. I skipped today. I'm doing yoga this afternoon. It's a rest day.
All right. Fair enough. We'll tune in later. Everybody will tune back in on the Zoom call for your yoga.
There you go.
Okay.
For the yoga class or post yoga class?
No,
either.
Hopefully she's going to lead us. All right. Fantastic. Well, great to see everybody. We'll start off with Jim, just to check in with you. Anything going on in your world you want to, mention?
So how many folks have signed up for the big product reveal coming up on August 3rd?
Is this like a gender reveal, Jim?
Sort of.
I think I have, but I'm not positive. I'll have to check my calendar.
Is there a landing page out there, Jim? And did the SaaS Alerts AMs or customer success team get that out to everybody?
So we've been promoting it on social mostly, and I think LinkedIn. Amy, do we have a link that we can put in the chat?
So not yet, because you
Okay.
wanted to announce it on this call.
Yeah.
And everyone
So-
already has the link to this call. So we have to talk if we're going to have a separate webinar, like
Oh, that's
specifically
true.
related to it, or if we're going to have it on this call.
No, it's actually my fault. So everyone is on this call is actually already invited to it by nature of the fact you're on this call. So
Yes.
as long as I just want to stress, Andrew and everyone, August 3rd is a really important call to make.
Okay.
And I've stated for a long time that our early adopters will be taken care of. And you're definitely going to want to make sure that you're tuning in to make sure that you reap those rewards of early adoption on August 3rd.
Nice.
Okay.
And then Jim, do you foresee, or Chip, putting you on the spot here a little bit, like when, if it is what I think it is, what we've talked, what, has been mentioned, but do you think there'll be some kind of back and forth from early adopters, Chip, on, like maybe doing some tweaking and changing, or, getting feedback on how they're using it, et cetera, usability, UI, UX, that kind of stuff?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think everything we've ever done, we've taken a ton of feedback from the partner community and refined things as we went along and added features and enhancements. So, there's certainly an awful lot in our product that comes from the DNA of the community, so to speak, already. So this will be no different.
Okay. That'll be a lot of fun. I think those make the best actually follow-up calls. Right. Once it's out, and then just talking through how people are using it, testing it, those really make a big difference, Jim.
Yes, definitely. So we've always said membership has its privileges, and I don't think we're going to be able to do anything that will top what we're essentially doing in Q3 for essentially everyone that has been with us, from the beginning. So
exciting news. All right. Well, I know we're in a holiday week, Jim, so we're a little light. We're 32. Normally we're in the 50s.
Yeah.
So we'll have to make sure that, maybe, I don't know, is it like, will Ryan and the customer success team kind of proliferate a lot of this out eventually, do you feel? Yeah,
exactly. So we're going to announce everything on the 3rd of August and kind of let people know. And then over the course of the quarter, we'll allow people to essentially take advantage of some of the things that we're talking about.
Okay.
I truly believe, and Chip and I were talking about this morning, that those that have been with us, and essentially up until pretty much end of this quarter, they're going to end up, at least as relates to SaaS Alerts, they're going to end up with significant advantage in the marketplace over their competitors.
It's awesome. Well, this is good stuff, Jim. Really good stuff. All right. Next, let's go to Michelle. Michelle, we have two things. I could put up the PowerPoint if you.
No Michelle today, Andrew.
I'm sorry.
I'm
Amy.
Michelle today. I'm Michelle. It's okay. You can call me
Amy.
Michelle.
Amy, sorry.
Oh, all
Amy,
good. So
hold
we do
on.
have two things.
Let me.
In addition to what Jim was talking about, we will be sending out a lot of marketing announcements around that too. So hopefully you won't miss it. We'll talk about it again on this call. But we do have the Beau Bullock series coming up. It starts next week on this call. It runs the 13th, the 20th, and the 27th. I can share the link with you in the chat. We've also got it posted on LinkedIn today. If you go to our SaaS Alerts page, if you want to share it with anybody. And then we have a Boost Your Sales Success webinar coming up on July 18th. I think that Michelle has shared the sales toolkit that was developed a week or so ago. We're going to really take a deep dive into that sales toolkit so everyone understands how to best use it to its full potential.
And Amy, I put those in there for you to make your life easy.
Oh, perfect. I'll put them in the chat though, so that I have them. I'll put them in the chat too, so that
no, that's what I'm saying. I put them in the chat for you.
You put them in the chat already? You're the best. Yeah. Thank you.
It's okay. All right. All right. Let's go to Chip. Chip, so you wanted to talk a little bit about Respond. Talk to us about that a little bit, what you're thinking, and anything to share from a screen side.
I don't think anything to share from a screen side, although, you know, if we do, I'll just ask you to share. I'll just share right from my side, but it's mostly a discussion about yet another change that we're going to be making with respect to SMS. I'm sure everyone who uses Respond on this call has already seen the changes we've made in terms of requiring opt-in messages and all that kind of stuff to comply with the new international SMS laws. There's even more about that that's going to have to change. The messaging will change specifically for our UK customers. We have to give you guys in the EU and the UK a slightly different cautionary statement, if you will. So we'll be incorporating that. But the bigger change that I'm looking for feedback on from this call, from this community, is around a notion that we would title it an SMS timeout. And the reason that we're working on this, and based upon some of the feedback we get here, I think that will influence the parameters that we set around it, is that we've discovered as Respond has become more and more popular and there are more and more rules created, there are a couple things that can lead us down a blind alley. The first is that some partner technicians choose to just ignore SMS messages. So they'll get repeated SMS messages, as the system is designed to do, that say, hey, you have this rule that triggered, and it requires you to manually approve the action that is stipulated in the rule. And they just get ignored. And the system so far has been told, hey, you just need to keep sending another SMS message every 5 minutes until they respond to that. Well, we've discovered that that's probably not a prudent practice. And what we're going to do is put an SMS timeout on that. Right now, we're thinking it's going to be a maximum of 10 SMS messages that are effectively the same message that says, hey, somebody needs to respond and approve this. And then we're going to flag it as a trigger and log that as another event inside the MSP tools section of SaaS Alerts, and log the numbers that were included, that were sent, so that MSP management knows, okay, well, here's what happened with the trigger, here's when it started, here's when it stopped, here are the numbers to which the messaging was sent. So you guys can close the loop on it. The other reason we want to do this is we've also noticed that there have been 2 incidences where an MSP created a condition, a rule trigger that triggered at a very, very low threshold. They applied it to all of their customers and received about 100,000 texts in 3 hours. So we don't want that to happen again. So we're going to start we're going to start rate limiting the amount of SMS. If we see a single rule that all of a sudden creates, 1,000 messages, we're going to pause that rule. Our support team will jump into it immediately, proactively with the partner and evaluate why I did that. But we're also working on, what is essentially an AI analyzer for when you create rules. We're actually gonna be able to tell you up front and say, you know what, looks like this rule is going to be a loop, or could trigger many hundreds of thousands of times based upon the configuration that you've set up. We're going to try and provide an expert system around that to keep people from running into the weeds. Obviously, there's a cost component to all of this. We are paying for SMS messaging whenever they go out, so that's part of our motivation as well. Certainly, be right up front about it. One of our goals, our product goals, is to be the best, feature and value, best value in the space when it comes to features and price, and we have to make sure that we contain things that can run away. So looking for a little feedback on all that from you guys. Do you think 10 is the magic number for tagging a trigger as something that's been ignored? I'm gonna start counting down in my head until someone asks a question I think they're gonna ask, but so let's start with that. Any reaction to that notion of timing out?
So well, one of the other options also is 5 minutes too often? Changing the interval. I like the idea of a timeout because right now I'm the one who's getting them, trying to keep an eye on my team. But the SMS is not going to my engineer. So I would like to increase that, I don't know, to either 10 or 15 minutes for a repeat.
Okay.
Gary, Andy has his hand up, but can I just ask a quick question, Andy, to the group collectively? Like, Gary, is, you've been I think a managed customer for a long time, right? Is there any way, Chip, to, if you're looking to keep costs potentially down, to do a combination of SMS to manage ticket and then have the managed ticket obviously start alerting, so that there's multiple ways in which you're hopefully staying away from that 10 maximum threshold?
Yeah, there is, but we actually have a better solution in mind that we're already working on. By the end of the year, possibly, and certainly by the end of Q1 of next year, we're going to eliminate SMS completely from anything that we do. We started work on a mobile app that's going to handle all of this kind of messaging. We're going to transition away from SMS for SaaS Alerts MFA. We'll probably just not use the mobile app for that, because everybody already has an authenticator app of some kind or another. So we're just going to conform to the standard and let you use Microsoft Authenticator or Google Authenticator or whatever you use. We're going to transition away from SMS completely. We've actually had that request for quite a while, mostly from our European customers and Australian and Asian customers, because they don't have, much to my surprise, most of them don't have free SMS the way we do in the States. Like, for us, SMS doesn't cost anybody anything, right? That's why we all use it like crazy. And they don't have that luxury in a lot of places. So it's time.
The other thought that I thought about, though, when you're talking about doing it, like as Andrew's talking about, if we're going to rely on our PSA, is the SMS maybe more of a reminder or delayed after 30 or 60 minutes saying, hey, you've got a ticket or an alert out there that hasn't been responded to via your normal ticket. Here's an escalation notice. Is it intended to be an escalation, or is it intended to be, well, let me rephrase it. Is it intended to replace a ticket?
Gary, you punched yourself on mute.
I did. I hit the space bar. Not good. So my question is the SMS intended to be parallel to a ticket, replace the ticket, or just as a reminder that a ticket happened that hasn't been responded to that might be urgent?
Yeah, it's intended to be parallel to the ticket, and I don't think we want to get into us looking at the PSA solution to see whether or not a ticket has been responded to in there. That's
Well,
a
no,
much
you don't
longer-
have to, because if your alert hasn't been, or if the rule hasn't been approved,
right.
then you know by definition, an hour later, hey, it's still hanging out there. Let's move to phase 2 or the backup method.
Yeah. I mean, the problem that I see with it is if, an MSP technician could be busily working away on the ticket,
Mhm.
collaborating with colleagues, deciding how they're going to respond, whether or not they're going to approve or reject. I mean, I don't, we want to try and, SaaS Alerts' goal is to be informative to the existing workflow, not to do anything that's going to modify an existing MSP workflow. So I think we want to stay out of that lane. The MSP notification or the mobile notification is really there to be a parallel convenience for people when they're on call. I mean, that's the main reason why we're doing it, right? We know that none of us want to be chained to our desktops, laptops, or whatever we use all day long, every day, even techs who are on call on a weekend. So it's far more convenient for them to get a message on a mobile phone that we all snack on. How many times an hour does the average person pick up the phone and look at it, or get an SMS alert or whatever else? So that's the logic behind us running it in parallel, is to make it so that people aren't chained to having to sit around and wait for a critical event to happen or a medium level event to happen. That's why we went with that approach.
Got it. And even patient.
Yeah, so Chip, I'm thinking through this from an operational perspective. So I've got an alert that's taking place and they're not acting on it. If I had the ability to, based on the severity of the alert or the type of customer, to route notifications to an escalation or to a distribution list, in addition, that would add real value. So basically I'm saying I'd like to be able to find classes of notifications, high critical. Hey, look, the engineer on isn't dealing with this when they should. I want to outsource this to solution granted, or I want to send this to the owner, or I need to update the customer, deal with this now, right? As an example. And so I'm just asking for that kind of thought process around the ability to move this through an organization and escalate to someone that, if someone is failing to respond.
Yeah. It's what we've been thinking of along those lines and have incorporated, as you probably know, you can include customer numbers for the SMS. You can include customer emails now, so that they're emailed when a ticket occurs directly. That's part of the organizational settings. They can be additionally emailed. We haven't built that email capability into Response so that the customer gets an email on a respond trigger, but they will get emails if you set it up that way in the organization settings. They will get an email on the fact that an event has happened, they'll get a ticket, basically the exact same kind of ticket that you would get in the PSA.
What I'm basically asking is a notification profile with escalation steps capability.
Yeah, no, I get it. So we haven't gone that far in our thinking of building an escalation chain, where you say, okay, first level respond rule is triggered, doesn't get responded to within 10 minutes. That's got to go to the next level. Another 10 minutes, got to go to the next level. And you want to stage those as a hierarchy of criticality, really, of who's going to respond. That allows the MSP owner really to have his tier 1 techs. They should respond to it. If they don't, I want my senior techs to be notified that the tier 1 guys didn't do anything. If they don't do anything, I want to be notified. And that's.
I was going to say, Chip, that's right on point, but then take this to a third level. And that would be, not only do I have an escalation profile, but I have the option of either implementing a rule to have it deal with this, or making a call to an RMM or some other utility that might help interact with this solution and deal with this. So I'm perceiving that with that escalation process and the ability to make webhook calls or API calls in addition, this could become a very powerful tool for cloud compliance.
Yeah, no, I like it. We'll definitely add that into our process of how we're going to continue realizing Respond.
Thank you.
Good stuff.
I'm going to chime in with my
Brian.
2 cents real quick. So the primary use case that I'm using, the text messaging, is for immediate response. I think that's somewhat its design. And so like, for example, for me, it's like almost all these things that we're talking about, I'd be doing in our PSA rather than through text messaging. And so like, what I feel is like after the first 4 hours, if you've alerted us consistently for 4 hours, if we're not responding, then we're doing something else, right? Like, I would say, stop alerting and not deal with alert fatigue from a text message perspective. Because the point is like if you went in and made a rule for respond where you're saying now you have to manually allow something and you're not responding to alerts, that's a personnel problem rather than a technological problem. And
Agreed.
if you're, text messaging for an extended period of time, you're kind of training alert fatigue on your personnel. And so like for me, the only two things I can think of is like either send it once an hour for 4 hours and then stop, or every 15 minutes for say an hour and then stop. Because it's like if you're not responding to it, then you're not getting any more value of like a tickler alert, right? It's like the only thing that I can think of is like you have no guarantee that the message was delivered to a device is a challenge, right? So it's like you're not positive that they can respond via that text message because you can't guarantee it's delivered to the device. But that's more of like a workflow challenge that if you don't have a failback mechanism, you don't have a personnel looking at your PSA, doing that as your primary thing, then that's, I think, the problem rather than just alerting.
Well, the other thing also is you could do what Exchange used to do, which is send it 5 minutes for the first 15 minutes, then 15 minutes for the hour,
Ramping.
then once an hour for a few
Yeah.
hours. Just so that it's a tickler there. I got one last night when I was out the door and, my on-call guy knew wasn't going to see it. But me getting it in the car every 5 minutes is just more annoying for something
Right.
that I couldn't deal with.
Yeah,
Exactly. And I can't see it, an alert via text message being useful after 24 hours, right? It's like if it triggered 24 hours ago, either the attacker got what they wanted or they or they didn't, right? And so it's
Right.
like you should be going, I think, to your PSA for things, for any kind of historical or knowing what happened. But I think the text message learning needs to be very, precise and early on, and not much more than that.
Yep. Okay. So just a quick recap, the consensus of least of those who've chosen to, voice their opinions on the subject is we should definitely bump off the 5 minutes and go, I'm thinking even to 15.
Agreed.
And probably, go with a maximum of 8, over the course of 2 hours. And then if no one's responded after that point, then, we record that as an unresponded trigger. And management deals with it from there. Because Ryan, as you stated, this is a personnel problem. It's not a technical one at all.
Yeah.
I will address one comment regarding, we have no guarantee that an SMS is seen. That's true. We do know when the SMS is delivered or not. I mean, our, Twilio.
But don't you get that from the carrier, not
Correct.
the device. So it's not like a
Right.
read receipt. So it's like
Yes,
you don't
not a
know
read
that.
receipt. It's
Yeah.
a delivered receipt, right? The message is in your mailbox. Whether you open the mailbox and pull out the letter, we don't know that. And we don't know if you open the letter after you've done that. So
Right.
all we know that it's delivered. So
Whereas
there is
like when you get to the mobile app, you'll be able to tell that, like whether
Yes.
someone's actually seen it or not. I think that might be more valuable for a
Correct.
responder.
Yep. Absolutely correct. So, okay. Well, I appreciate that feedback, everybody. I think that's very helpful. I think we're going in the right direction. Gary, I'm sorry that we annoy you every 5 minutes when you're in your car, but at least I know you're thinking about us.
We are, but the good news is my my CarPlay has a mute button, so I can turn it on.
So how about from partner side, any product things before we leave product that you want to discuss maybe with Chip? Don't have to, just figure I'd bring it up. By the way, Andy, I sent you a message in chat. And you ignore me. Kind of hurt.
I didn't see that. I was actually multitasking.
It's okay. It's okay. All right. So I'll start off with this, Chip and team. I just wanted to see, for those of you that were on with us last week or even the previous week. Any comments, feedback around the Verizon data breach report and Ryan Weeks joining us? So this could be just any comment in general. Have you used it at all in any type of thought leadership? Have you brought any of this information to your customers? Any of the above? Guess no. Sounds like that's a big resounding no, Jim.
I would say like I
Sounds
had
like it.
a little bit of a hard time following like where he was suggesting to start or like a certain kind of cadence. What I got the gist of is that, and this is kind of what my takeaway was that a lot of people are forgetting about the IT hygiene piece and the policy and procedure piece, and they focus more on the technical tools and processes. And that seems to be kind of the biggest gap and could be the biggest assistance in like moving the ball forward and like just getting rid of stale users and computers, for example, right? Like that's a non-glamorous thing. And that's the thing that seems to be being left out in most of the breaches, and seems like has the biggest impact. If we did that more categorically as an industry, we'd have the most bang for the buck. Is that kind of what you would think what we're supposed to get out of that talk?
Well, I think there was a lot there to unpack. Your first statement, I think, is true. You know, like Ryan's, you know, really bright, and there was a lot to, you know, it's a very big report, a lot to unpack. However, your other point was, I can't put enough I'm really glad you said it, Ryan, because I can't put enough exclamation points on it. God bless you, Amy. In terms of if you know, whether if we pulled in John Strand and his IR team at Black Hills, if I pull in Clark Harshberger, who's the director of incident response from CrowdStrike, it's no shock that what you just said, I mean, almost always it's the basics. Almost.
Well, I'm going to share something that kind of terrified me that I ran after of that last meeting. Was I ran a report of across all of our clients and how many stale user accounts we have in Active Directory,
right,
versus how many active accounts, or the comparison number I'm going to say is what's in our PSA system. And so we currently are managing 14,000 endpoints and we have 10,000 stale users.
Wow.
So Ryan, you know, you're singing our song here, right? In terms of something we've been preaching for a while. I'm curious if you used the SaaS Alerts, you know, organization management reporting to.
I did not. So I used a product called LineGuard, which has on-site AD inspections for Active Directory to do my comparison against. And then, you know, there's been a lot of kind of roadblocks in trying to clean this thing up, in the sense that shared mailboxes can be challenging, right? So it's like verifying whether this company has AD Connect and all their correct settings and what those synchronizations can be, that if you deleted something or didn't know that you like you're disabling an account, you could have downstream ramifications. And so like giving client expectations of when this cleanup's happening, we've found that clients don't tend to inform us when users leave or when they get hired sometimes, as you probably are all really well aware. So like this builds up a certain thing after time, and anything that doesn't have costs associated with it, anything that doesn't have a Microsoft license, seems to be the hard thing to clean up, because it takes time sometimes to figure out what is that account really used for. Is that a shared account, a vendor account? And if you've gone through 4 or 5 MSPs prior to getting to us, that may never been known. Like that is so far back down that you kind of have to start all over again. And oftentimes we find is the clients don't want to do like the scream test, and that, let's disable the account and find out what happens. Right? Like that can be too business disrupting, we're finding, for many of our customers, but we need to get there. And so it's like, how do you keep a certain cadence on that when you have so many clients and so many things to do? So
Ryan, can I ask why you didn't use our account management feature? Because
simply because we don't have it broadly deployed yet. So it's not, I couldn't get a number across their entire environments. Whereas the tool that we have the broadest visibility on right now is LineGuard, and that was able to give me the most amount of information that's inside our client's environment directly.
Well, we have to change that, A. And B, in terms of, we've been singing this song now for a long time. This is a pervasive issue in Microsoft 365.
Mhm.
So I can tell you today, I just looked at my dashboard. As of today, we have 630,000 billable users. Anyone want to give a guess on how many actual accounts we're monitoring on our MSP community's behalf?
I'd guess over 1 million.
Anyone else want to guess? Take on Ryan. We'll play Price is Right rules. We got Ryan in for 1 million. Adams,
I would say higher. I would say triple that. So closer to, I would think it'd be closer to 3 million.
okay. So Andy and Adam are disqualified based on Price is Right rules. You're over.
Okay.
Ben is coming in at $1. Nice try, Ben. Based on Ryan's million, Ryan is the closest. So we're actually at 1.2.
Okay.
1.2 million. So basically it's double.
Yeah, that's
Right?
basically what we're seeing as well.
Yeah, it's a huge, huge issue. It's why we put account management feature in the product.
Mhm.
There's not enough folks using it. It's like, it's actually quite disappointing to me that
The one thing that I would find the most helpful in the version of the account manager on your product is whether there was a box that tell whether it was AD connected. If AD synchronization was enabled, doing that cleanup, you have to do very different procedures than if there's not.
You mean
Right,
local AD, hybrid?
Correct. Right.
Yeah.
So like most of our clients, we synchronize Active Directory with Office 365. And when we convert people, so when a user leaves, we have a departure, we disable the account, convert it to a shared mailbox. And if any of those steps didn't take place, you have to do certain steps to not break that synchronization or fix it. And so knowing that whether that's in place or not, it allows us to clean up things quickly or have to do a little more research and be more careful before we do that cleanup. Because what we've found is very often is that clients are using shared mailboxes or not converted to a shared mailbox, like they'll leave a license on, but that's a departed user. And so like if we're going categorically of like when was this departure date, then we accidentally disable account sometimes that they're trying to access for a specific reason. So we can't just like click a button and say disable all or click a button delete all when we have those options available to us. And so that's the one thing that I found is like if I knew right away that this client didn't have that, then we don't have to be nearly as mindful of having to deal with that synchronization problem. And it is an available API inspection in Office 365 where it will tell you if directory syncing is enabled or not. So like if you could have a small little flag next to that client that, hey, it's enabled, that was a trigger to know I need to look at this a little more detail, make sure everyone's still following the correct procedures on our service desk, because if say someone forgot to convert someone to a shared mailbox and we go and disable it, we've only got say 30 days in Microsoft land to recover it, right? And so like that's where we run into that challenge.
And Andy's got
Like it.
an impatient hand up. Andy, I want to ask Ryan a follow-up. Andy, sorry, Ryan, anything, did you look at service accounts? I'm just curious.
Oh yeah, like we've gone through a lot of service accounts, we've disabled. Basically, we can kind of categorically tell if an account hasn't been logged into, say for an easy math, a year, we immediately disable it. But if it's been logged in or has interacted it with anything within this year, we have to go and trace it down. Find out, is that an account that it's under our care? Is that another vendor's account? Sometimes like just the labeling is wrong. Like someone may have used the name for this company and now they've gone through a name change and now you don't know what it's for because you've lost some of that history. A lot of this like company knowledge. If we're not tracking on behalf of our customers, oftentimes our customers lose that company knowledge as they progress, and we kind of get into a stuck spot where like no one really knows what to do from the client's perspective, and we have to kind of figure out, okay, what's the best option here? It's like, do you think this is critical in nature? Do we need to test this on the weekend, or can we turn it off now and figure it out? That's kind of what we were working through. But when you have as many clients as we do, it takes time.
Sure. Andy, and by the way, that's a really good segue for Beau, because I mean, it's exactly what he does when he's doing offensive pen testing. He's looking for the path of least resistance coming in. So,
Andrew, before you jump to Andy, Connor or Alex, I'm not sure who is Ryan's account manager, but definitely want to get an enhancement request in for his request there on adding, some kind of symbol into the organization management screen that just lets them know when it's hybrid AD. Sorry, Andy, off to Andrew.
Oh, it's okay.
Sorry, Andrew, off to Andy.
So here's my question and observation. I perceive there is so much valuable content coming from each of these SaaS alerts that if we're not participating in each one, we miss out. And the Reddit channel or a newsletter where you were able to say, these were the topics of discussion, and here's an index to this YouTube, and Ryan just talking about stale accounts and his example of finding it. And here's the example of another YouTube where we talk about how to do this in SaaS alerts. Having that guidepost or that mechanism as a newsletter or part of the Reddit feed, or however you guys choose to implement it, makes this resource incredibly valuable, because now we got concepts that link together week to week and evolve over time. And most partners, I didn't do what Ryan did, and I'm going, God, I'm pretty stupid, right? I need to be doing something more, and to be able to go back and say, what was it that I needed to look at? Oh yeah, it was here, and this is why.
Yeah, Andy, are you fully deployed on SaaS Alerts?
Fully deployed to those that have it. In other words, if they're not, some doctors' offices say, hey, I'm not doing any email, and they do their own personal thing. So I can't deal with that. But yes, where we have Microsoft 365 or Google, we deploy it.
Okay. So you'll be able to use the account management feature effectively.
We
then.
could, exactly. But what I'm getting at is that I think as partners, as part of an onboarding, by the way, this is, increase your prowess with cybersecurity and compliance with SaaS alerts. Bam, and here's that whole section of things to go through.
Mhm.
Right?
Yep. Yeah.
Anyway, that was my remark, is that making this is valuable, but taking it to a whole nother level is indexing and talking about strategic concepts around SaaS alerts and its implementation across the customer base.
Okay, homework. We'll take all the YouTube videos, put them in a translator, open it, ChatGPT it, ask the good recommended, things, and then we'll see what we get out of it. I think that would be a fun little process. Crowdsource our own meetings, essentially.
Yeah.
Divide and conquer. I mean, that would be another way to do this. I think that there's real value here, and being able to pull it up on demand and reference these concepts. Just Ryan talking about his experience, that's tremendous.
Mhm.
What I've found helpful is that there's different levels of language that are used, and there's a degree of formality to the language that when you get into compliance, that many people have a hard time grasping. That once you kind of jump between those levels of language too far, you lose people. And so trying to take the compliance frameworks and things and kind of reduce it down to less formal language, even if it's the same content, has been helpful for us in trying to communicate this with our business owners, because just giving them information on these reports, whether that's the Verizon data breach report or a CISA report, it's so formal and looks legal, and it becomes challenging for them to digest it. And so like we try to pull it down and put it a little more into context for like, what does that mean for their business or their use case? And we found that being very helpful. And it sounds like what Andy, you're somewhat asking is like somewhat from our perspectives, like where can we kind of quickly jump in? Like where's the roads most frequently traveled that we can walk down these paths a little bit and see, kind of almost like an atlas of like, hey, other partners have gone down these roads, and if you're already down this journey, this is where you can start. And
I was going to say, and Jim and Chip, if you think about the value proposition as people onboard, being able to see how this all connects together and gets utilized at a partner with partner testimonials, it would be huge.
Yeah, I don't know when the last time you went through onboarding, Andy. Probably it's been quite a while, right?
Yeah, I was an early adopter. So
Yeah, exactly. So the onboarding does encapsulate a lot of this at this point.
good.
So
I'm glad.
that's a good thing. And we do have, and we try to promote the fact that we now have over 45, I think 47 5-star reviews on channel program. Thanks to folks like you guys. Usually people say good things about us on Reddit, which is nice. But you know, we see a lot of strings sometimes that go on around like 365 management and stuff that we wish people would kind of like say things about us, because you know we're still not a huge player in the market, so a lot of the bigger vendors still get a lot of the conversation.
AI chatbots to SaaS Alerts rescue is the next thing.
Yeah.
Is anybody, Ryan, I'll start with you. I just have a question, Ryan. Are you familiar with, the term SOAR, and from a security perspective, security orchestration, automated response?
Yeah, I'm familiar
So
with that.
like when you see what Respond is doing, do you look at this and go, this is really a SOAR?
In a lot of ways, I do, in the sense that, it becomes a little challenging in the sense of trying to provide enough, like a single response plan, right? In the sense that, like, how are we sorting through this information and responding in the total picture versus this narrow viewpoint? Whereas, like, we're, for the most part, looking at this as just from an email perspective,
Fair.
right? And so trying to stitch that together in an overall source kind of system can be a little challenging, but it's close to getting there. Like just, for example, from when I first onboarded, December of last year to now, just that last 6 months, I've seen so much change, and that narrative or the supporting documentation and conversations around it have gotten so much richer that it becomes easier for me to navigate through how you guys as architects or designers are thinking through what that SOAR kind of system would be.
Right. And again, you bring up a good point. Like, obviously, we're not saying this is like, Simplify, which Google bought, which can obviously aggregate, any type of an event and then provide, you can, again, I don't think most MSPs are at the maturity level to take a full-blown SOAR. What I do feel though, and I would love your guys' comments, because I talked to Jim and Chip about this a little bit offline, is that I think they are and I say this, Jim, with all due respect.
Yeah, of course.
Doing yourselves a disservice, because if you had maybe a reference architecture guy, it doesn't have to be crazy, but so that people could understand, wow, like, hey, we saw this, and this, and we automatically took this action to prevent a threat actor from doing, here are the things we can do, and here's some reference architecture. Like, I think that could be helpful for MSPs to understand what is possible, and, the fact that you're providing that automation for them. And, hypothetically, Ryan could say, well, gosh, we should be, maybe to his ownership, look, we've only deployed this to this many endpoints. This would save me a lot of time and your labor costs, because if you allow me to do this and, across here, I can mitigate these types of threats and labor wise save, a fair amount of money. But I mean, that's what I see externally. I don't know if anyone else comments on that.
Well, I agree, Andrew.
Okay. Oh, but, I was just more looking for the cohort here to,
Yeah.
could they relate to SOAR messaging?
What I always find like very helpful is, like, from the designer or the person who's created the product, having the an example of what the perfect version of it is in your guys' mind can be helpful as a frame of reference, just so that if I ever wanted to compare like what we're doing versus what you're suggesting, if there's a gap, there may be a legitimate gap that's there that we as an organization have chose to cover in it, say, a different way. But as the product matures, those gaps can change or grow. And so having the ability to kind of compare against that, it's like config management, right? That makes it quickly to know like, oh, this is a new gap that I need to cover. I didn't think about this. Or is there a gap that I've already covered in a different way?
Right.
I
Good
can
stuff.
take a crack.
Go,
If
go,
you-
Jim. I mean, go, Chip.
You know, back to Beau's presentation last week, we had a conversation or a back and forth around the way security has really transitioned, information security has transitioned from the device being the primary point of attack to the account being the primary point of attack. And Ryan, when you talk about SaaS alerts, you talk about it in the context of it being something that you do for email accounts. And many of our partners do that. I'm always surprised when people refer to what we do as protecting Exchange or 365 email, when in my mind, that's never, ever, ever been the primary mission at all. That's actually like a side mission, because there's already anti-malware products and anti-phishing products and that actually protect email. But the Microsoft 365 account is a gateway to a much bigger universe than email. So our goal, and one of the reasons that we priced SaaS Alerts the way we did from the very start, was to try and help the business community realize that active monitoring and now automated response is as essential to the environment of cloud accounts, specifically 365 and G Suite, because they're the new directory services, as antivirus was, in the late 1990s when antivirus first became a thing. It's got to be completely ubiquitous. Otherwise, you're ignoring what is arguably the biggest vector for data loss for businesses.
So, Chip, before we get comments, can I comment on what you just said with a few things here, and then let Ryan and everybody comment?
Oh yeah,
because it's really relevant to what we didn't get in today, and we'll come back to this. So let's talk about identity, right? Which is where you started. And how, when we look at the Verizon data breach report, what Ryan said last week around info stealers. Okay. Well, this is a new one out right now called Medusa, and it's targeting password managers, crypto wallets, as well as 95 web browsers, Discord, Steam, and system metadata. Now, what's really interesting, and a whole list of games and things of that nature. And by and large, I would imagine, again, for your typical user, right? They're going to use similar username and password, fair? Hence why these info stealers are so important. Now, one of the things that SaaS alerts and a lot of tools have relied on, I just will share this and one other thing, and then we'll open it up for discussion, is geolocation. Well, again, threat actors continue to evolve, as we know. So their info stealer makes sure that their next stage when they're deploying this sets up geolocation in region. So just wanted to share with you there that, maybe the next step is, once they're selling, access broker data, that they potentially have geolocation staged in region as well, based on where they took the data. Is that making sense at a high level?
completely.
Yeah. So the other thing that we've talked about today was AI, and an interesting article on AI and SaaS alerts. And I'll just stop sharing this, Chip, in a minute and just show you. But this literally was really what you just said. It's quoted from the article. I can share the article, but I literally wanted to, I was chuckling, Chip, as I read this, and I'm like, well, what could go wrong with this, right? With AI solutions using, M365 and Google, right, as the mechanism for authentication. And then obviously what we're seeing is these mechanisms of lateral movement. So I'll pause there, Chip, turn it back to you, let you make a comment, and then let's open it up for everybody and kind of have some fun with this, quote unquote.
Well, my first comment was this wasn't scripted. What Andrew and I just went.
Right, exactly.
And I look on the geolocation piece. We are definitely seeing that. I certainly can't claim it's in response to SaaS Alerts as a product, but we've definitely noticed that info stealers, hackers, have become much more aware of doing their homework. Anybody beyond a script kiddie is going to be targeting a specific company, and they're going to do their reconnaissance first. And the first thing they want to know is where they are, because one of the things that we do notice is a pattern. The rate of attack or a probing increases dramatically in the off hours of when a company would normally be doing business by their geolocation. So we see that in the password spray attacks and in the brute force attacks like crazy. So, East Coast United States, those things rack up like nuts at 9 o'clock at night, when the hacking community kind of safely assumes, all right, everybody's, done working there. So they're really aware.
But these are, what's interesting, Chip, if I could just interject, what's interesting is these aren't even hands on keyboard, right? So now the info stealers are injecting in their automation, right?
Yeah.
Saying wherever we steal, we're going to stage to get rid of geolocation, and then probably sell our data with that additional metadata that you need to stage here. So it's really interesting the steps the threat actors are taking to, again, make sure that detection continues from their side to be more difficult.
Yeah, well, where this is going to get even more dangerous is, I think, up to fairly recently, this has probably been a manual process, right? Somebody that is going after Jim Lippy, because he's the CEO of SaaS Alerts, is doing recon on Jim Lippy and doing recon on SaaS Alerts to find out what it can about the company's geolocation. That's all going to be automated if it's not already. It's all going to be scraped. It's all going to be, it's not really AI or machine learning, but it's pretty easy just with sort of classical scraping methodologies to get that information and inject it into your automated process anyway. So, this is part of the war, right? This is always, there's always a new weapon, and there's got to always be a new defense.
Yeah. So Ryan, you were probably going to make a comment when Chip was talking about identity. I'm sorry to interject, but I'll let you start things off in the last few minutes here and see where we end this up. But I wanted to show everybody this because I thought it was fascinating.
I think, identity is really important, but it's identity is fragmented across a bunch of different systems. And so to operationalize each thing becomes challenging, right? It's like right now, Microsoft is the primary identity platform, but most of our clients also have other identity platforms that all of our tools and even their tools don't all integrate to. And so there's still gaps in that identity, and trying to build workflows around that can be quite challenging. So it's like we're trying to pick it apart as the most return on investment as possible, and getting it down to like there's going to be a point where like the amount of effort it is to harden that one system becomes too detrimental, either to time or to cost. And so trying to I for example, I've had a like wish in my brain for a long time where, from a support technician, it would be great to be able to like say, come on IT Glue and see every application this user's ever used, every computer they've used, looking at from a user's context and how those all things relate to each other. But trying to like stitch all those things together is so challenging because a user changes their behavior at different times of the year, different shifts. Like a person, like we think a person is a person, but they change over time, and those behavior kind of heuristics do change. Like we have many clients that have an entirely different process during the summer than they do the rest of the year. And so like when we try to put them in a category of like, okay, this is their normal cadence, it becomes really challenging because that really changes over time. And so like, for example, geolocation, like I'm starting to not rely on it at all in the sense that like, it's not necessarily great data. It's just another corroborating factor. But like I think for far too long, we as defenders have kind of shot ourselves in the foot with geo blocking, where we just say, let's block everything from Russia every single time. And we just so categorically did it. The Russian hackers were like, fuck, I can't do any of this. I guess I'm going to always use a VPN and now hide in Azure. Well, that's a lot harder to piece through. And so we've taken what was pretty good signal noise and muddled it up because we're trying to respond to it. And we've always been a little bit behind the curve in the sense of, I think we focus sometimes too much on our previous data set to try to figure out what's the next thing we need to do. And the attackers are doing a little bit of the opposite, where like they're looking at what's the new things that are out available rather than relying on what I did previously. And they're a little bit faster on being more agile because they do that.
But I will say this, and you said it earlier about hygiene, Ryan.
Oh yeah.
They're still doing the tried and true things way more than innovation. In other words,
but I think that's a gap that we put in because as an industry, we keep trying to grow and have more tools and try to get more complex and close these
100%.
gaps. And then we forget to do the basics in the very beginning all the time. And they're like, well, instead of the attackers are going like, well, you're 10 steps ahead, but you forgot fucking step 1. I'm going way back here and then I'm going to blow you out of the water. Yeah.
Well, the last thing I'll say, if I can, Chip and team, is, I mean, there was an article last day or two ago. There's still literally a remote code execution that was just mentioned on FortiGate. See, Andy, that 330,000 devices are still completely exposed to the internet for remote code execution on Fortinet. And so to your point is like, we're leaving the doors open because of our hygiene is so poor. So anyway, awesome stuff. Can't wait to have Beau with us next week. Jim, you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, just countdown's on. So Beau, we got 7 days.
Yeah.
And so looking forward to it.
Yeah, we got to do a big blast and get people to our SaaS Alerts call with that, with showing up.
Yeah, should be fun. Looking forward to it.
Chip, Amy, thanks. Appreciate everybody's contribution as always.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a great
Thank you all.
Bye,
Have a great
guys.
day.
Bye.